That night, the stage shook. The crowd could barely breathe. Muscles gleamed under the spotlights, and the tension was almost tangible. For giants, one throne. Behind the scenes, full of mystery, unexpected decisions, and a twist that would mark history, something extraordinary happened. Right there, bodybuilding changed forever, and you're about to see why. So grab your pre-workout and come along, because it's time to relive one of the most intense and controversial editions of Mr. Olympia. The year is 1967, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. On September 16th, 1967, New York City witnessed another milestone in bodybuilding. The third edition of Mr. Olympia. Once again held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, the event was already starting to feel like a tradition. After the success of the first two shows, the hype was through the roof, especially because Larry Scott, the undefeated champion until then, had announced his retirement. With the throne wide open, the big question was inevitable. Who would be the next king of bodybuilding? Unlike today, when dozens of athletes compete, in 1967, only 4 men walked on stage. Sergio Oliva, Harold Poole, Chuck Sipes, and Dave Draper made up this exclusive lineup. But don't be fooled. The smaller roster only made the battle more intense, more personal, and way more dramatic. Larry Scott's absence created a mix of opportunity and uncertainty in the air. This edition also brought a technical innovation. For the first time, the athletes could perform with recorded music. That gave the show a new energy, letting each competitor pick a soundtrack that matched their style and posing flow. It was an important step in turning the contest into a real performance, a key move for the sport's growth. But Olympia wasn't the only attraction that night. The event was part of a true sports marathon promoted by the IFBB. Alongside Mr. Olympia, the crowd also watched Mr. America, Mr. World, the Miss Americana contest, and even circus-style strength and balance acts. It was a full mix of competition, entertainment, and physical celebration. The theater was packed with around 2,500 fans cheering for every routine. Many had traveled long distances just to see their idols up close. The atmosphere was festive but tense. A new Mr. Olympia would be crowned that night, and a single mistake or minor flaw could cost the title. It's worth remembering that back then, Mr. Olympia was still trying to establish itself as the most prestigious title in the world. Many still saw the NABA Mr. Universe as the top event. But little by little, with the IFBB's influence and the charisma of its athletes, Olympia was changing the game. And it was in that setting that 4 men stepped on stage with the same goal: to make history. The battle would be fierce, the crowd demanding, and the backstage full of surprises no one saw coming. From that moment on, Olympia would stop being just a contest and start becoming a living legend. When the spotlights lit up for the main event, the 4 finalists of the 1967 Mr. Olympia showed the crowd exactly why they were there. First up was Dave Draper, already famous as the Blonde Bomber. Draper was a legit celebrity at the time, appearing in movies and TV shows. His charisma electrified the theater, and his entrance was met with thunderous applause. But his prep had taken a hit due to filming Don't Make Waves and a packed schedule, which cost him some muscle definition. Even so, Dave owned the stage with his presence. His physique was still imposing, carrying that classic California beach look that fans loved, but it wasn't as sharp as in 1966, when he had one Mr. Universe. He posed to a soundtrack from the 10 Commandments, but the audience was so loud that nobody even heard the music. Despite the conditioning gaps, Dave proved that charisma is also part of the competition. Right after him, it was Chuck Sipes' turn, and he shocked everyone. Compared to the previous year, he looked like a completely different man. His physique was insanely dense, with arms pushing 21 inches, veins popping across his forearms, and a chest that impressed even the most seasoned judges. Sipes still had weak points in his legs and back, but his improvements in presentation and symmetry were massive. Beyond his physique, Chuck impressed the crowd with his stage presence. His routine was set to the soundtrack of Ben-Hur, and he hit every pose with confidence and precision. It was the perfect combo of raw power and aesthetic refinement. Many in the audience started to see him as a real contender for the title, something unthinkable just a year before. And then everything stopped. When Sergio Oliva's name was announced, the entire atmosphere shifted. The crowd went silent for a split second and then erupted in shock and awe. Sergio had come back bigger, sharper, and more defined than ever. His 28-inch waist contrasted with massive shoulders and huge thighs. He looked unreal. In 1966, he was already impressive, but in 1967, he looked like he'd stepped out of bodybuilding's future. With every pose, Sergio pulled emotional reactions from the audience. His physique had improved in every aspect. More mass, deeper cuts, better control. They called him the Myth, and that night, the nickname felt like pure truth. His muscles looked sculpted, and his stage presence was a masterclass in dominance. For the first time, the crowd didn't just see a competitor. They saw a new icon rising. Finally, Harold Poole hit the stage. A veteran of the Olympia, runner-up in both 1965 and 1966, he delivered a solid, confident, and technically sharp routine. His soundtrack from King of Kings added drama to his entrance. Harold had near-perfect symmetry and impressive muscle volume. His most muscular pose was still one of the highlights of the night, always pulling loud cheers from the crowd. But despite his talent and track record, Poole hadn't progressed as much as his two main rivals. Sergio was operating on a visually revolutionary level, and Chuck had made a huge leap forward. Even so, Harold was respected by everyone, and his performance was still among the night's best. All four athletes showcased unique styles, each worthy of the stage. The only question left was, which one truly deserved the crown? When the lights went down after the routines, the audience waited anxiously for the new Mr. Olympia to be announced. But backstage, an even bigger battle was happening. And it wasn't on the stage anymore, it was among the judges. At first, Harold Poole had the majority of the votes. After 2 years as runner-up, it finally seemed like his moment had come. The win felt so certain that one of the organizers was already walking to the mic to announce his name. Then the unexpected happened. Someone, likely Joe Weider or his brother Ben, interrupted the process, suggesting the athletes be called out again for a side-by-side comparison. The reason? One last check, just to be sure. That tiny move, one comment, one step, one call, completely changed the course of history. Poole's announcement was seconds away, and suddenly, it was put on hold. With the curtains closed and the audience unaware, the judges reorganized the competitors for a secret second round of judging. The tension was heavy and the air thick with uncertainty. The athletes were called to pose again under silent, close scrutiny. Almost no one knew this was happening. A hidden reevaluation that wasn't part of the original plan. This second round dragged on for several minutes. Exhausted athletes, pressured judges, and finally a new, final vote. When the scores were tallied again, Sergio Oliva emerged as the winner. From a likely loss to a historic victory, everything flipped in a matter of minutes. For some, it was a fair correction to honor Sergio's jaw-dropping performance. For others, it felt like a suspicious move favoring one of the Weider's favorites. The whole episode was documented by Dick Tyler, a judge and journalist at the time. In Muscle Builder magazine, he described what really happened. Poole had won, but the decision was reversed under internal influence. Interestingly, later IFBB accounts and official websites either omitted or watered down this part of history, almost erasing it from bodybuilding's collective memory. The controversy raised doubts about the fairness of the judging and reinforced how much sway the Weider brothers had over the competition. There's no hard proof of intentional manipulation, but the fact that a rejudging occurred after an initial decision has fueled theories that still linger today. And it's exactly this twist that makes the 1967 Olympia one of the most controversial editions ever. And when the final announcement came, September 16th, 1967, officially went down in history as the night Sergio Oliva became the new Mr. Olympia. At just 26 years old, the Cuban didn't just win, he redefined what bodybuilding could be. His victory wasn't just a title, it was a turning point. Sergio became the second champion in Olympia history, taking the crown from the legendary Larry Scott, and achieved a historic first. He was the first Latino ever to claim the sport's most coveted trophy. The coronation scene was unforgettable. Joe Weider, the driving force behind the IFBB and the worldwide growth of bodybuilding, handed Sergio a silver tray with $1,000 in cash, the largest prize ever awarded at the time. The audience erupted in applause as Sergio, grinning from ear to ear, dropped the phrase that immortalized the moment, "Sock it to me, baby," a popular slang of the era that instantly became his victory signature. What truly stole the spotlight was Sergio's otherworldly physique. His massive muscles contrasted sharply with his razor-thin waist. The cuts, density, and sheer volume of his muscle seemed to belong to a different reality. Back then, many called him a freak, not as an insult, but as a way to express their shock at a body that shattered every standard known in the sport. Up until that moment, bodybuilding's aesthetic had been defined by smooth lines, balanced symmetry, and a more classic look. Sergio blew that tradition apart. With his outrageous genetics, massive muscle bellies, and once-in-a-lifetime proportions, he ushered in a new era where extreme mass and sharp definition became the ultimate goal for competitors. But Sergio didn't just win, he inspired. His journey as a Cuban immigrant, former Olympic weightlifter, and symbol of perseverance resonated with the crowd. He wasn't just another champion. He embodied the idea that discipline, dedication, and the right genetics could create something the sport had never witnessed before. Beyond the trophy and the cash, Sergio earned something priceless: respect. His fellow competitors, even those who disagreed with the final decision, knew they were standing next to a physique that would reshape the future of the Olympia. Fans left the theater in awe, with the feeling they had just witnessed the birth of a living legend. Sergio's victory didn't just end a heated contest. It also sealed the future paths of the other stars from that night. Harold Poole, runner-up in the first two Olympias and seconds away for victory in 1967, never returned to the Olympia stage. Feeling undervalued after the behind-the-scenes reversal, he left the IFBB and joined the rival WBBG, winning the Mr. America title that same year. Chuck Sipes, who delivered a show-stopping routine and was clearly on the rise, made a similar move. Known for his raw strength and powerful physique, he also left the IFBB and found success in the WBBG, but never returned to the Olympia. Both men chose alternative paths, and their careers after 1967 drifted away from the sport's most prestigious stage. Dave Draper, on the other hand, had a different trajectory. Young, charismatic, and a media favorite, he was already a celebrity outside the competitive circuit. His 1967 Olympia performance fell short of expectations, landing him in fourth place. Combined with his acting career and fitness persona, this result marked the beginning of his exit from competitive bodybuilding. Like Poole and Sipes, Draper would never compete at the Olympia again. While Poole and Sipes left for rival federations and Draper stepped away, Sergio Oliva began his reign. The following years saw the rise of a true dynasty. Supported by the Weiders and his overwhelming image, Sergio became not only a champion, but a cultural icon. The Olympia, once a rotating title, now had a king with a fixed throne. Another fascinating aspect of the 1967 Olympia is how it became a legend without ever being fully seen. For decades, this event lived only in the memories of those who were there and in the sparse pages of magazines. Unlike modern editions, no widely available video existed. Black and white photos captured frozen poses but couldn't convey the energy, drama, or atmosphere of that historic stage. To fans and historians, the event became a visual myth, known, yet untouchable. This visual void has long frustrated bodybuilding enthusiasts. After all, this was the edition that gave us Sergio Oliva's first Olympia, the permanent exit of stars like Poole and Draper, and one of the most controversial finals in the sport's history. And yet, there is no footage to study the nuances of the routines, the crowd's reactions, or the side-by-side comparisons that decided it all. Ironically, even the strongmen of the early 1900s, like Eugen Sandow, left behind more accessible visual records than this pivotal night in 1967. Everything changed recently, thanks to the relentless efforts of the classic bodybuilding community. Jared Hulse, a member of the Iron History Forum, discovered and shared extremely rare clips from the original 1967 Olympia recording. The forum, known for gathering true Iron Game archaeologists, celebrated the find as a lost treasure. For the first time, fans worldwide could see Sergio, Poole, Sipes, and Draper moving on that legendary stage. The recovery of these images not only brought life to a nearly forgotten night, it also provided new insights into the judging, the crowd's reactions, and how each athlete carried himself compared to the others. Many were stunned to see just how much Sergio dominated in motion. Others noticed technical details that photos alone had never revealed. This visual experience reshaped the way the story of 1967 was told. The footage offered something even more valuable: emotion. Watching Sergio's fluid movements, Harold Poole's tense gaze, Draper's charisma, and Sipes' quiet strength added a human dimension to the legend. These men were no longer just iconic figures frozen in history. They became real people with unique gestures, rhythms, and presence. It felt like opening a time capsule and reliving the soul of an era. The reaction on social media and specialized forums was immediate. Historians, athletes, and fans began dissecting every frame, reviving a fundamental chapter in the rise of the Olympia as a true spectacle. Once again, it became clear that bodybuilding's past still holds many hidden gems, waiting to be rediscovered by sharp eyes and passionate hearts. Although the Mr. Olympia was the highlight of the evening, the 1967 event was far more than a single contest. It was a full-scale bodybuilding festival, a celebration that featured multiple competitions and performances for every type of fan. The marathon began with the traditional Mr. America, where Don Howarth, famously nicknamed the Duke of Delts, stole the show. He not only won his category, but also the overall title, earning thunderous applause as the most impressive physique of the night. In that same contest, Frank Zane also shined. He won the medium class, displaying the symmetry and proportions that would make him a legend in the years to come. Yet, despite a flawless performance, he lost the overall crown to Howarth. The disappointment was palpable, especially because his girlfriend and future wife, Christine Harris, had just won the Miss Americana title on that same stage. A double victory for the couple would have been historic, but fate saved that glory for another day. The Miss Americana category, essentially a beauty contest with a fitness touch, had few competitors that year. Still, it caught the audience's attention for a special reason. Christine's presence marked one of the first times a woman so closely involved in the male bodybuilding scene took the spotlight. She trained alongside Frank, and together they would soon become one of the sport's most admired power couples. Next came the 1967 Mr. World, an international showdown won by Rick Wayne, who in a twist also opened the event singing live with a band. Rick wasn't just a sculpted body, he was a natural performer, radiating charisma. His routine combined definition, control, and stage presence, earning him not only the title, but also the awards for Best Arms, Back, and Overall Presentation. It was a complete sweep. Between the main contests, the crowd was treated to jaw-dropping strength and balance exhibitions. Chuck Sipes, besides competing in the Olympia, thrilled the audience by breaking chains, bending steel bars, and even twisting railroad spikes with his teeth. He was living proof that a bodybuilder could be as strong as he looked. Another highlight was the performance of the David and Goliath duo, two acrobats specializing in balance and strength routines. Famous for their appearances on American TV, they executed daring, synchronized stunts that combined circus technique with raw muscularity. It was a lighthearted and impressive break between the tense competitions. Finally, the legendary Jack DeLinger made a special guest appearance, posing on stage despite being visibly out of shape. A former Mr. America, 1949, and Mr. Universe, 1956, Jack received heartfelt applause for nostalgia and respect. His physique was no longer the same, but his presence reminded everyone of the sport's roots. Amid a night dominated by revolutionary new physiques, he was a living link to where it had all begun. In 1967, Mr. Olympia was still not unanimously seen as the greatest bodybuilding event in the world. Many still considered the NABBA Mr. Universe, held in London, as the true stage of the giants. And in fact, that same week, Europe also witnessed a historic night. Arnold Schwarzenegger, at just 20 years old, won the amateur Mr. Universe title, while Bill Pearl, already a celebrated veteran, took the professional version of the tournament. The distance between the continents also reflected a division of prestige, but that boundary was about to crumble. While Sergio Oliva dazzled the audience in New York, Arnold was beginning to build his own myth in London. Few knew it, but that would be the last time their paths would remain separate. Soon, their destinies would meet at the Olympia, and the world would witness one of the greatest rivalries in the history of the sport. Olympia, in turn, was no longer just an event, it was becoming a symbol. With Sergio Oliva's victory and Larry Scott's retirement, the stage entered a new phase. The era of classic aesthetics gave way to the era of raw genetic power. It was no longer just a muscle contest. It reflected the time, the culture, and the changes that shaped the ideal physique for each generation. It was also in 1967 that Olympia began to stand out as the ultimate showcase of professional bodybuilding. The internal disputes, controversial backstage moments, iconic appearances, and aesthetic advances marked undeniable evolution. Even with few competitors, each edition carried greater historical weight, and the eyes of the world increasingly turned to the New York stage. Looking back at this chapter of history, we realize that each Olympia is more than a podium. It is a mirror of what the sport was and of what it was about to become. Sergio's victory, the quiet farewell of rivals like Poole, Sipes, and Draper, and Arnold's parallel rise in Europe were all pieces on a chessboard that would shape the entire next decade. Seeing these events with the distance of time allows us to appreciate even more what was at stake. Every pose, every judge's decision, every burst of applause or booing contributed to building a spectacle that transcends generations. The 1967 Olympia was not just a competition. It was a crossroads, and from it emerged the paths that would take bodybuilding to global phenomenon status. And now the word is yours. If you enjoy this deep dive into bodybuilding history, leave that like. It helps our work a lot. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you want to support even more, consider becoming a channel member. That way, you help us keep bringing epic content like this. Drop a comment below. What did you think of the 1967 Olympia? Do you think Harold Poole was robbed? And was Sergio Oliva's physique truly ahead of its time? Let's chat in the comments. Oh, and if you haven't watched our full video about Mr. Olympia in 1966, where Larry Scott said goodbye to the stage with an emotional victory, the link is in the card and also in the description. Don't miss it. See you in the next chapter of history, because on the bodybuilding stage, every detail counts. See you there.